kicking off with what's shaping up to be a rather intense week for the French government.
Yeah, as La Croix tells us, it is going to be, as it says on its front page, a decisive week for Emmanuel Macron's government. On Thursday, its pension reform bill will come up for a vote. And as the French paper notes, Elisabeth Borne's government still does not know if they have enough votes outside of their party to get the highly unpopular pension reform bill passed. Meanwhile, strikes continue and especially you can feel it in Paris, as Huffington Post tells us. Thousands of tons of garbage are piling up in the French capital. Garbage collectors and incinerator workers are on strike over the bill of increasing retirement age. So as Aujourd'hui en France, Le Parisien tells us, residents are walking around garbage bins, holding their noses, being thankful that it isn't summer. The paper tells us that the garbage strike is expected to last at least until Wednesday, when workers will decide whether or not to continue striking.
Now, Solange, the retirement bill, that controversial legislation, it isn't the only thing being discussed by the Parliament this week. Debate also begins on nuclear energy, and the issue is on the cover of several of the papers today.
Yeah, surprisingly, even more than the retirement issue, the discussion today by Parliament of nuclear energy and France's nuclear energy future is in many French papers. As we see, L'Opinion, Macron's project for the future of nuclear energy in France. The paper calls it a new chance, but it comes with much uncertainty, L'Opinion says, about how to pay for it. In this vein, Libération says that this project to build 6 new nuclear reactors at a cost of 52 billion euros is not realistic, according to the paper. It says that the project will likely cost much, much more, questioning how and who will pay, who will foot the bill, and also who will do all of the engineering, but also the construction. Libération says that some 100,000 jobs would need to be filled in the next decade to do this plan. And also, Libération notes that beyond the debate of the merits and dangers of nuclear energy, there's the reality that France's nuclear energy is not the end-all, be-all of reducing France's carbon footprint. Currently, nuclear energy covers much of France's electricity needs, but the country remains, as we see here in blue, very dependent on fossil fuels for its other energy needs, and the nuclear plan, it says, is not the magic solution. Also, Le Parisien explains that the safety of the current reactors is also being hotly debated, or will be today, as the scientific and safety community said that the government's plan to change the body, the organization that oversees the safety of the sites, could be a dangerous and unwarranted move. Not to mention, as well, as we see in Le Figaro, the issue of nuclear energy is one that is pitting France and Germany at loggerheads, with Germany more in favor of renewables. And in this vein of renewables, Le Monde tells us that when it comes to solar energy, the world is hopping on that bandwagon, but France is not.
Staying with that theme of the environment and the climate crisis, you found another few articles, Solange. One is positive, but the other isn't.
Yeah, let's tackle the bad first. As The Guardian tells us, scientists fear that the planet is facing what it calls phosphogeddon. That the phosphorus we use as fertilizers worldwide to create food or to boost food yield. That phosphorus is located in just a few countries, namely in Western Sahara, and its stock is being depleted. But in addition to this rare element being that agriculture depends on, in addition to it being overused, it's also causing, as we see here, algal blooms that release methane and cause dead bodies of water, which adds to the climate crisis and it could get worse with the rise of temperatures. That's the scary article. Now I found another completely different one that could make us a little bit less reliant on the highly polluting cow industry. The Washington Post tells us that there are major advances have been made in labs to create dairy, but not using animals. That this what's called precision fermentation uses yeast and fungi to create animal-free milk that tastes like milk. And companies like Nestle, General Mills, and Starbucks, well, they've already signed on to eventually market it as a greener and just as yummy alternative to cow's milk.
Finally, hot off the presses, Solange, you found some articles about the Oscars.
Yeah, there is much praise, as we see in Variety today, in the press about how Everything Everywhere has swept the Oscars, with Cahew noting in his speech that it was an American dream night for him. But there is also a good deal of criticism, too, as we see in the Los Angeles Times. It says the film was no doubt the talk of the town, but was that deserved? It asks. The wins were, it says, a watershed moment for Asian Americans in the U.S., but it laments that Hollywood still hasn't been able to, quote, prioritize the specific over the multiversal, or, quote, a film with subtler insights. And in this vein, The New Yorker, it argues that it questions our need for happy narratives at these award shows. The need for underdogs winning out, the underrepresented finally getting the win they deserve. Many of those narratives decide the outcomes, the New Yorker says. In the end, such events are really about milking or polishing Hollywood's ego in what the cartoon movement calls a, quote, weepy self-congratulation fest of Hollywood elite. In other words, there are many cheering the Oscars, but there are many Oscar the Grouch's critics out there as well.
It always turns out to be somewhat divisive coverage of the Oscars. Solange, thank you so much for that. Solange will be back with us a little later in the programme. But for now, do stay with us here at France 24.